Hey, it's Dave here again, and we're going to talk about bloating again. This is the fourth video in the series, and in this video we're going to talk about the toxins and the gases that tend to be produced in the digestive system that ultimately end up in bloating symptoms and sometimes other problems in the digestive tract as well. So, just a very quick recap. We said that bloating typically is caused by an excess of bad stuff in the digestive system and a deficiency or inadequacy of good stuff in the digestive system. We've already spoken about food and bugs, the bad foods and the bad bugs that tend to exacerbate the bloating symptoms. And we're now going to talk about these toxins and gases. Now, most of the gases and toxins that I'm going to talk about are produced by the bad bugs, and the activity of the bad bugs when they use different foods to create their own energy. So basically they're eating whatever you eat, they're just living off the morsels and the scraps in the digestive system that don't end up in your body. Now, you're always going to have a background of gas production in the digestive system. That's perfectly normal. We all have a little bit of wind, a little bit of gas, a belch or a burp from time to time. But it's when these things are obviously in excess and that they're uncomfortable that we have a problem. Now, the typical problem gases that we have that are produced in excess, usually due to the overgrowth of bacteria in this condition called SIBO that we mentioned in the last video, are things like hydrogen, methane or methane, and H2S, which is hydrogen sulfide. And you can have a pattern of gas production that includes one of these gases or possibly more than one of the gases. And the only way you can really find out which gases are involved is through running a breath test that measures the different production of these gases over a period of time after you've actually drunk a drink that's basically full of sugar. So you drink the sugar and then the lab measures all of the different gases, or particularly the hydrogen and methane, should I say, in the breath over a period of time. And that's diagnostic actually of whether you have SIBO or not. Now, you can also infer that there's hydrogen sulfide production as well. If you have a lot of foul smelling farts, eggy smelling farts, sort of rotten vegetable smelling farts, and if you don't do well on things like garlic and cabbage, eggs and other sulfur containing foods, high sulfur foods, there's a good chance that you've got a problem going on there with hydrogen sulfide. Some of the microbes that overgrow in SIBO lead to hydrogen sulfide production. We also mentioned H. pylori in the previous video as well. And H. pylori can produce a little bit of hydrogen sulfide, but it can also produce ammonia as well. And while ammonia might not be the key gas when it comes to bloating, and particularly these symptoms that we're talking about in relation with that pattern, ammonia production, when it's too high in the digestive system, can really lead to a lot of problems with energy levels, mental clarity and mood. It can really be toxic to the nervous system. And sometimes ammonia is at play there, but maybe not so much in relation to the bloating. So predominantly we're talking about hydrogen, methane and hydrogen sulfide in terms of the gases. And I'm going to talk about how to interpret a SIBO breath test in another video so that you can understand the dynamics and the interplay between those gases. Now, another substance that's really important to mention, again, it may not be specifically related to bloating, but while we're on this topic, I think it's important to mention, is this substance that we call LPS. And LPS is an abbreviation for something called lipopolysaccharides. And sometimes you'll see that written as endotoxin as well. And these lipopolysaccharides are produced by certain types of bacteria in the digestive system. They're produced by what we call gram-negative bacteria. And these lipopolysaccharides can be very, very irritating to the gut lining. In fact, they are known as one of the substances, alongside things like gluten and alcohol and what have you, to actually make tiny separations in the tight junctions in the intestine that ultimately leads to this phenomenon called leaky gut syndrome. And so if there's a lot of LPS in there, you can have pain, you can have a lot of immune activity in the digestive tract, you can have diarrhea, constipation, etc. You can also develop this leaky gut, which then opens you up to a whole plethora of different problems potentially elsewhere in the body. Because once the gut is leaky, things can get into the bloodstream from the digestive system before they've been properly processed in the digestive system. And once that happens and all of this stuff starts floating around the bloodstream in the body to your liver, to your nervous system, your brain, your kidneys, your reproductive organs, etc., you can start to develop a bunch of problems as a result of that. There's way too much to talk about in relation to the LPS and the leaky gut just for this video. So let's just wrap up here and say that as part of this pattern of too much bad stuff being in the digestive tract, you have an overgrowth of bad bugs. They can create gases and toxins that have a significant amount of potential to irritate your digestive system. And so bloating is the tip of the iceberg. And this is a nice little point into which I'd like to inject another idea, which is if you have a bit of bloating, that's one thing. It's uncomfortable, it can be embarrassing. You know, if you're belching and you're farting alongside that because there's too much gas being produced, you know, it's not great socially, you're probably self-conscious of it and what have you. But the problem with bloating is if you leave it and you don't do anything about it, maybe because your doctor just says it's normal or whatever, and you do have a bunch of this stuff going on in your digestive system, in 1 year's time, in 5 years' time, 20 years' time, this can actually lead to a very messy situation that could end up with you having some kind of medically diagnosed disease like an autoimmune disease, arthritis or something like that as an example, or a skin disorder, or even something like infertility as a result of not dealing with these seemingly minor issues in the digestive system. And I think when we get to talk about the digestive testing and the importance of it all, I'll go into that in a little bit more detail, because a little bit of bloating today might lead to a lot of problems further down the line if you don't deal with it at the opportune moment. So I hope that's been helpful. In the next video, we're going to start talking about how the good stuff can become depleted and deficient, and talk about how that might actually directly or indirectly lead to bloating as well. So I look forward to seeing you next time, and as I say, I hope this has been helpful. Any questions you have, please fire them across to us and we'll get back to you as quickly as we can. Thanks a lot.